Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Cultured Nerd Podcast. This week, Michael and I are sitting down with comic writer and screenwriter Jeremy Adams. We're going to talk to him about his career with DC, career with Warner Brothers, and everywhere else where he's actually done a lot of projects, a lot of films, a lot of scripts, and his new deal with DC Comics. So we're going to sit down, we're going to talk about it all, and I hope you all enjoy. And here we are.
That was a great opening. Which one of you guys did the opening?
So I did the intro.
Everything's
and one of our writers, one of my editors on the website actually did the music. And I was like, okay, well, now I have to change the editing to make it more epic.
That's awesome.
We had a lot of fun with that. So it was really cool.
Great. It's great, man. Great. I love that stuff.
A long time ago, Mr. Jeremy Adams, you were a little boy, a young lad in the world learning about comic books. When you were a kid, what were the heroes that you first gravitated towards?
Well, so here's the weird thing. Well, number one, first of all, do you have like a Bunnicula shirt on or like what?
No, I have Daffy Duck as in a Batman costume.
Okay, I was like, okay, wait. I was like, is that Bunnicula? Like, okay, great. That's
Bunnicula is a deep pull. No, it is not a vampire rabbit
or Count Duckula. I thought maybe more Count Duckula. Probably.
Could be a Count Duckula.
But I'm like, anyway, doesn't matter. Listen, so I've had comics since before I was born. My dad drew some comics, not very many for DC, weirdly. And the first one I remember getting is, I have it over there. It's like a Detective Comics Batman, where like Killer Croc is an assassin. Jason Todd has orange hair, and I got it after getting a shot at the doctor. And I remember very vividly reading it, going like, "This is terrifying." So my heroes growing up was definitely Batman, Spider-Man, your basics as a young child, and anything I get my hands on. And then I grew up during the age of like the Super Friends and stuff, and not just Super Friends, but Superpowers in particular, the toys. Yeah. That was huge. That was huge for me. And for the superhero stuff, I probably was more of a Marvel kid growing up than I was a DC guy. I loved all the Bat stuff and the Bat family and DC martial arts stuff. That was stuff that I really gravitated toward. And the Marvel stuff, my brother and I shared custody of an X-Men collection that was not that great. But my brother, just like, the story of Jacob and Esau, like traded my birthright for a complete collection of Spider-Ham, and I was too young to know. He's such a jerk. He's like, well, you could have this complete collection, or like issue 100 of X-Men and then like 98. Who wants that, Jeremy? And I'm like, okay, big brother. Like, totally screwed me.
That's amazing. That's a deep cut reference too. I enjoyed that. Yeah. But comic books for Michael and I, we grew up roughly the same age. I mean, we're maybe a few months apart, but we grew up in the early 90s during the heyday of Marvel, when it was kind of in its last like hurrah, where they're like, everything is going to be Marvel on cartoons, on TV, trading cards. They went nuts and then they went bankrupt, but before they went bankrupt, they went nuts with it. So Spider-Man, X-Men, all of that stuff was like the staple of our lives. And then you had the Batman animated series, which was the other staple. And then quickly how it all turned around. So it sounds like very interesting dynamic there, but if we all could compare the random comics that we had as kids and realized how much they were actually worth, it would have been insane. But
I don't know how quickly I understood. Like I was all about quantity over quality. No, I'm not. I was. Yeah, that's exactly right. I said that right, but it's the end of the day, so I'm a little wacky. And I would. I have terrible taste. And so I was sitting there, and I could get like one Spider-Man comic, or I could get 5 New Universe comics. I'm like, I will take the New Universe, So I have the complete collection of Cyforce and Night Mask and whatever, and that definitely informed. I wanted more comics than I did, quote unquote, good comics. So
But that's how you get into those worlds, and and there's also there's a price point to that as well. That what
Right.
are you willing to get into, and how do you want to get into it?
Right.
And
There's something about those comics that no one's paying attention to that ends up being it's sort of like why I like really low budget martial art movies and low budget action movies, because a lot of times people aren't paying attention, so they can do something a little different, a little weird, where nobody's watching, you know. And that's a huge thing that I love. Like in regards to the new universe, at one point they must have realized this is all going to lead to bankruptcy, and they decided, like, well, let's blow up Pittsburgh and let's kill off a bunch of people. And I was like, oh, this just took a really dark turn, you know. And all the books just got exponentially stranger, and I found myself gravitating toward some of the kind of like weird twists. You know, it's sort of like when Peter David, I don't know if you ever read when he did X Factor, and there's this one in particular. Oh my gosh, guys, there's this one twist that he does with Madrox the Multiple Man. It is so dark and crazy and comes out of left field, and I've never seen a comic do something like that before. And it was messed up, but it was so good.
Now, remind me if I'm thinking Peter David did the X Factor run where Multiple Man was a private detective. And
yeah.
And then he, like, was it like 6 months or so, he split off a bunch of his personalities, had them all learn different skills, and then when they came back, he became like a schizophrenic.
Yeah,
wasn't that?
Wasn't even but that wasn't. I'm just going to spoil it for you.
That was the setup. I remember being like,
this is like 19. This is like, I don't know if it's early 2000s or 90, but what happened was he got somebody pregnant and she gives birth to the baby, and when he goes to hold the baby, he absorbs the baby because it's
because he's a multiple man. As one of his multiples made the baby.
It's so effed up. It's so unbelievable, and I was just like, what just happened? What just happened? It was crazy.
I blocked that out. Maybe
we live in a time now where the moment you do something innovative like that, it's going to be known.
Yeah.
Where there's all of these gems of the past.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Do we still get those twists, or do we expect those twists? I feel like the audience now, every time there's a universe event, they're like, that event's not as good as the last time they did something.
Yeah,
it's like,
there is that criticism. There is that criticism. There also the thing, like, I didn't realize it because I'm just a fan, and but I wasn't like retailer fandom. And let me put it this way: is I hate you know, the when they put out the catalog for like, oh, it's April or it's DC, and it's just like, and we're just going to ruin all your books. You know, sure. I try to make the synopsises of my book completely generic so it won't spoil it, but if it's on the cover or whatever, you know, there is a kind of, some people higher up are just like, no, we got to sell these books. And I'm like, you're going to ruin the surprise. Like, I want people to be freaked out. Or like, I'll give you an example. When I was doing my flash run, the issue before they get to Heroes in Crisis, they're redoing Heroes in Crisis, the cover shows them at the Heroes in Crisis. And I was like, you can't show that. That's the reveal. That's the last page. But I also have zero power and constantly afraid I'm going to get fired. So I'm like, whatever, you know, but it drives me crazy.
Yeah. So whenever I pick up my pull list, I always see these on the shelves, the DC Connects. And I'm like, I wonder what random spoiler I'm going to get by looking at next month's issues. Because like, this is the March 25 issue. And I think I've already got the one for June and July for this year. And I'm like, what's the point in seeing that? I'm just going to wait for the trade at this point, because I saw the cover of issue 3, and now I know issue 2 is going to be insane.
Yeah, so I think we should really embrace screwing with the customer. Like there was, I think it was Stephen Moffat at Doctor Who or something, and he said, I think it was Moffat, it might have been somebody else, but he said, and I take this point of view, it's something I'm going to integrate into my life as a writer, is that he lies constantly. He's like, so that you will never know if I'm telling you the truth about what's going to happen in the series. He's like, I'm just going to lie so that I am a totally unreliable narrator. And I try to tell people, because a lot of times the covers really have nothing to do with what's going on. And I don't know. I wish all covers were Silver Age covers. like just
they're just
crazy,
really
like,
cool action covers.
yeah,
And
like people talking, like their brains are exploding, and like, you know, oh no, Lois Lane and Batman are together. Like, I want that kind of level of insanity.
I mean, it might come back. Someone's got to do it, and then it has to become a thing, or make it.
I beg them monthly. Like, let me do this.
The Spider-Man show that was on Disney Plus.
Oh yeah, I haven't watched it yet.
They have some really great, like, kind of cover issues right before the episode starts. So it'll go through the theme song and it'll get a really great image. Some of those are little jaw-dropping. It's like, oh, is that really going to happen?
Yeah.
But they've got a really great art style because it's based on the 60s. The kid looks like the 60s Spider-Man.
Yeah. That's awesome. See,
it is such a weird show, but it's like it works in its own weird way.
Yeah.
So I liked it for what it is. I mean, my love of Marvel has always been like the street level Defenders characters, like
Daredevil,
Moon Knight. I always loved those characters. I love Spider-Man and the X-Men, and then everyone else were like the B and C tier to me. I'm just like,
I totally get that. And it's always, if I dipped into like Iron Man for a while, or if I dipped in the Hulk or Thor, it's always been a specific run. Like Iron Man for me at a certain time was Armor Wars. And I remember being like, this is effing awesome, you know, and Captain America was huge for me, but that I didn't find out until later. It was written, most of the stuff that I love was written by this guy named Mark Grunwald. And I was fanatical because I had picked up, there's this great Captain America cover. It's Captain America No More. And just the angle of it, it's like the American flag's bleeding behind it. And it's basically like the government is saying, hey, we own this. And that's where John Walker comes from and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And but around that time, it's definitely like an age when you get into it, like that's what you're in. But X-Men were always big. I was always big into X-Men. They always had something going on. It was crazy, you know.
It's wild that my first introduction to Iron Man was Iron Man the cartoon, where he just fights magic villains.
Oh,
like he's a guy in a robot suit, and the first 5 episodes are just magical people.
That's funny. That's cool. Yeah, my stuff, like, you know, I was past the Tony Stark is an alcoholic, you know, like obviously there was a lot of happening in the 70s, and my dad, who's an artist, like, and a substance abuser, like, I get it. Like, obviously those bullpens for those things were replete with a lot of substance abuse. So I think they were all out working, you know, Speedy with heroin. I'm like, what's that based on?
That's based on Jeff at the back of the hall. He has a problem. We want him to be addressed by it. So.
Yeah, totally.
Well, no, it's always been such an interesting dynamic with the comics themselves, because you see just historically, you saw like how comics were very pulpy, very war propaganda, like the 40s and such. Then they took like a hard, dark turn in the 80s, and then like it kind of bounced away from that because of all the parents who said, no, this is wrong. And then now it's kind of settling back into this. Now you have comics for kids, and you have comics for grown-ups, and it's kind of finding its foothold in those little realms now. But even as a kid, I remember like reading, I think one of the first comics that Michael, your dad, bought you was like the Spawn versus Batman sets.
Oh, really?
And
the McFarlane art is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Spawn says something to Batman, and he's like, hey, don't ever come to Gotham again. And he just throws, and there's just a bat in his face, and it's green, and it was like, where has this been my entire life?
Yeah, that was that image revolution. I mean, it hit so hard because I was collecting a lot as a kid then, and when that hit, it was like there was nothing cooler. Like I will name drop braggadocious for a minute. I was having a conversation with Jim Lee, which I can't tell you how surreal that is, you know, for somebody like me. Because all I'm thinking about is Wildcats, and I was like, holy crap, you know, Cyberforce, and it's like it looks so good, and it was so splashy and visceral and fun that it was great. Now, was it like super deep? No, you know, but that's okay. I didn't want that, and I still probably don't want that. Like, I'll read it, but it's not. I'm not the sophisticated guy. I want to, you know, I like good twists, I like good action, I like good adventure. But when I read it, I'll you know, like, I'm excited to read Absolute Martian Manhunter by Dennis Camp.
Yeah,
because he pitched it, and or he said it at New York Comic Con. He was talking about it, and I was just like, holy crap, that sounds mind bending. Like, I totally would go for that, but it's not my generally I like to be just entertained,
And I know Michael hasn't read the Absolute lines, but I've been buying every issue, and they're just insane, and I love them so much. The Absolute Batman run was crazy. I'm still loving it.
It feels kind of like Image a little bit, though. Like
it feels like
just big. Yeah,
it reminds me a lot of like when the Ultimates came out in like the early 2000s, when Marvel's like, we're gonna do something weird and let's reinvent everything. And I'm like, they kind of did that with the Absolute runs, and these are just like. Absolute Wonder Woman is crazy. I love seeing her with a tattoo sleeve and a giant sword. Superman story with his living suit made out of the ashes of Krypton. I'm like, this is the craziest stuff. And I love the setup, and I love what they're doing with it. And my teenage son, I picked him up the first couple issues of Absolute Batman, and he reads them and he comes to me. He's like, hey, Dad, this is insane. Batman's carrying an axe. What is happening? And I'm like, just roll with it. It is the coolest book. And he's like, he just cut that dude's hand off. I'm like, that's what the axe is for.
That was crazy. And then even when you see the Batmobile, you're like, this is insane.
He's out like the dumpster truck, and then he's like, okay, how's he gonna get away? And he like transformers it into like a Batmobile, and I'm like, what is happening in this book? It's like they jumped the shark, and now the shark is attacking another shark.
And I love that. I love it. I mean, listen, it's like when I read, when I was a kid, and it was like Rob Liefeld was doing X-Force or even New Mutants, and I'm like, can these guns get bigger? Like, can there get more pouches? But it was awesome. Like, I can't tell you how many times I write descriptions in my books that are like a Liefeld-sized gun, and everybody like, I know exactly what that is. Like, I know what this is gonna be.
He can't draw feet, but he can draw guns. But so with your comic runs, you now signed an exclusive deal with DC, which is exciting and awesome. And when we were looking through all of your stuff, I saw you.
Mazel tov! What a career you have built to get to a place where you can be and do this. That's a really amazing thing to. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. It's very humbling. I feel very fortunate. Like I don't take it for granted at all. Like I'm just like, really? Me? Really? Like that's the kind of thing. Full of self-doubt and self-loathing. Like, okay, I guess,
Well, all the best artists are like that. I mean, that goes with the territory. I mean, there's no way around it.
Right.
But I was looking at some of your just your filmography on the screenwriting side of things, and you have been attached to so many projects that I watched with my family.
Oh, cool.
I mean, you've got, I'm just sort of jump through them real fast. Supernatural, apparently you did work on that show, and that was a fun show. I mean, I always felt that the show outlived its stay. I mean, season 5 was the perfect ending, and then they're like, we're going to keep going. And I'm like, all right, well, we'll roll with this.
The cool thing is I only wrote 3 episodes, but like they were fun. Like I did the Scooby Natural with my buddy Jim, where they get sucked into Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. And one of the best, more recent episodes. Like, no joke, Michael. If you can go onto Netflix, find that singular episode, you may watch the rest of the show because of that episode. It
is such a gateway drug to that show. And then I did 2 episodes in the last season because they hired me. They're like, we don't want you to do anything with the plot. I pitched them I probably pitched them 20 insane ideas, and they were like, those are too insane. So I ended up doing like a Roadhouse episode with Christian Kane because I was a big fan. And then I did an episode with this lady named Mrs. Butters, who's like a housekeeper, and that was really fun. But you should have saw the ones that they did. Yeah, but Supernatural, that was my first foray into the live action, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And was Mrs. Butters like a Mrs. Doubtfire?
Yeah, she's not like a guy dressed as a girl, but it had that vibe. I mean, originally I was literally trying to get Barbara Eden to be this kind of like genie inside their bunker. And she slowly goes a little crazy, but it was a way, because I was such a fan of the show. It's an episode in which I answer a lot of unanswered questions just for nerds of the show. Like, like the telescope in the background, like we never see holidays. Like I was just like zooming through. It's a big montage, and it was really, really fun.
Those are always the fun fan service episodes where people care about it. Like, oh, there we go. Now I have closure. It's not going to be like Lost, where 20 years later I still don't know what the hell was going on.
Yeah.
But they put Lost inside of an office building, and it's the best show on television. Because Severance is doing
Right.
I feel like whenever you have the first of something, like Elvis was the worst rock star because there was no example for Elvis, and then the next guy's like, don't do what Elvis did.
Yeah.
I think the best part of Severance is they could do all the things like just don't do the stuff that Lost did. And it's
yeah,
like, great,
well,
use
say that, but what were we on season 2? Talk to me on season 5 or 6, and we'll see. Because money is a huge motivator to screw up your program. Like The Matrix, I always feel like after the first Matrix, which is a perfect movie, and it's just like, they go to the Wachowskis and they're like, well, we really see it as a trilogy, because it's like you want that paycheck, right? Like you want to be able to cash that thing.
And I actually enjoyed the fourth one, but I also thought the meta aspect of the fourth one, where you could kind of tell that they were writing, basically saying if we weren't doing this, they would do it wrong, and that was kind of like the vibe that you got for like the first act of the movie. And I'm like, wow,
I wasn't the biggest fan of the fourth one, only because the actual quality of filmmaking was like such a letdown, and
it was garbage.
Weird.
It was
weird
garbage.
cinematography.
It didn't look good. The other movies, regardless of story, the cinematography is great.
Yeah. Well, that was because
so well.
That was because the DP is Bill Pope, who he's done. I think he did The Crow. He did Army of Darkness. Like, he's a genre master. He's a master DP. But also, like, it looks slick. It looked expensive. My biggest problem was, here we're coming off of like John Wick, and I'm like, you have to, now, Keanu, how to do fight scenes now. Like, we know. So don't do these garbage fight scenes. It's
He's done with Neo. He wants to be Constantine.
Can
you get him to be Constantine again?
Oh my! I love that movie. I love Constantine. I really liked it. I know it's not. It's a weird thing, because as a nerd, I get weirdly, like, people go, you'll get a leveled criticism at you, like, oh, you're just racist because this person's, you've swapped out somebody for black. And I'm like, no, I get upset that somebody doesn't have red hair, like, I get like that. But again, Constantine was a weird thing where I'm like, he's not British and he's not blonde. And yet I really enjoyed that movie.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe I am terrible.
So I am the same way. Like, I love comic book Constantine. Everything about the Hellblazer comics, absolutely fantastic.
Right.
When I saw that movie, I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Where's the magic? It's very Catholic and very no magic involved in this thing. Okay, we're doing this. And then when I finished watching it, I'm like, damn, that was still a good movie. It was like, everything
when he's going away from Satan and he's giving him the middle finger, I was like, like, that's awesome.
They nailed it. There it is.
That was great. Anyway, sorry, I don't know what were we talking about. Comics, movies, what?
But so, I mean, your other filmography, Michael, over the last year or so, he got into this really big, I want to watch every DC animated film ever created. And it just turned into him binging everything.
I worked at Blockbuster for years, and those movies would always come to the shelf for a long time, especially in the 2000s. That was the market for it. And they've always been so wildly good. Like, regardless of what was going on in DC movies or the comic books, those standalone stories, they are always so fun and such a great incarnation of the characters. How does it work from the comic book side to bringing it over here? Because sometimes you're changing the audience, maybe a little older to a little bit younger. Sometimes you're the spirit of a storyline, but not directly. Is that so that I watch this and then still want to read the comic book, or is that constraints of time?
I don't actually, there's not necessarily a symbiotic nature with it. Like, obviously my career started in animation. Like, my first credit was on Green Lantern, the animated series. And then I got, I was on the show Justice League Action, and which was really fun. They're fun, quippy things. And then the movies I started doing were all Lego kind of kid-friendly movies, Lego Aquaman, Lego Flash, those sorts of things. So the good thing for me, or at least the fun thing for me, is the standalone superhero movies that I got to do. I was very fortunate because I started working with this guy, Rick Morales. We'd done like 10 movies together, all the Mortal Kombat animated stuff. But we had done Battle of the Super Sons, which is one of my favorite things I've ever done, the Super Sons movie. And then with Bruce Timm, I did Batman Soul of the Dragon, which is this like Batman martial art movie. And they're so disconnected from the kind of integral universe. So even with the Tomorrowverse, I co-wrote a JSA World War II movie, but then I did a vignette in a war world thing, just a very small thing. Anyways, a lot of that, Jim Krieg, who's like my mentor, co-writer a lot of times, he always says with the animated stuff, we're trying to do a version that you remember, but like everything you remember, it's not that version, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, to give you an example, I was saying this the other day. I remember, because I worked at Blockbuster too, and I remember when I was a kid, the Batman movie, not the 1989, but the Adam West Batman movie came out. And as a kid, I put it in and my brain melted because I thought this was the greatest action series known to man. I didn't know it was a comedy. Like, as a kid, I had no idea. So we're kind of writing to the thing we remember and the vibe we remember. Like Super Sons, the movie I did, it's very much the vibe of Pete Tomasi's book and horror. It's very much that vibe. It's not directly ripped from a story, though. Same with Batman Soul of the Dragon. It all takes place in the 70s because it's supposed to have this Neil Adams vibe to it. And that's what Bruce wanted to capture. And so it has this, but it's not, but all of that being said, we got a lot of creative leeway. We got to just, it's very few people, it's very few notes. And that's what I think retains the ability to make it so creative. And because of that, because of my work at Warner Brothers Animation, that's how I got on a list to do comics. Like, it was Dan DiDio was like, hey, these Warner Brothers Animation things are so great. I want a list of your guys' writers to come in. So Josie Campbell, me, Megan Fitzmartin, Tim Sheridan, and a few others, we all went into a meeting where Dan DiDio was telling us about 5G and how we're going to write it all. And we're like, what's happening? But that didn't work out, but my name was still on a list. And that's how I ended up doing a couple backups. And then they finally said, hey, you have any ideas for The Flash? And I said, I'm a nerd of a certain age. I have ideas on everything, and they're like, great, you're taking over The Flash. I was like, what? So it was really weird.
And that's got to be such a wild thing to have happen. I mean, that'd be like the biggest, like, what? Okay, now what do I do? Like, the immediate overwhelming responsibility of it.
It was insane to have happen. I was convinced. It felt very much like Princess Bride with like the Dread Pirate Roberts. It's like, I'm most likely to kill you in the morning. Like, I kept thinking, well, they'll obviously fire me after this one. Right. And they told me right away, they said, the odds on you getting more than 12 issues on a book is almost impossible. We don't do that anymore. And so, especially those first 12 issues, I was just like throwing everything I wanted to do out. Like, I did this like crazy, you have to flip the book upside down and blow on it. And they're like, oh, I'm going to write one with my daughter. And like, they got Kevin McGuire to do a backup. And I was like, well, I'm done. Like, if Kevin McGuire's, I'm done. I won. You can fire me now,
So, I mean, you did a lot of great work with The Flash. I've seen you have a lot with Green Lantern. You did a lot of work on the bring back of Flashpoint when they brought Flashpoint out of nowhere. What has been your favorite character to write?
Oh, that's tough. I have a real affection for Wally. And I think that's probably because, it was like my first real run. And also the book lends itself to allowing you to do like really weird stuff because you're like, this guy can run fast. And then you kind of work around it. And very early on, I said, I just want this to be like a Doctor Who book where it's just kind of adventures and crazy and whatever. But I'm married. I have 2 kids, just like Wally. I have a very peculiar job. Like it spoke to me in a lot of ways. And that was really, really fun. Now, putting that aside, because I will, it's really fun to create characters. Like Gold Beetle is super fun because she's a chaos ball of energy. And I love writing her. Writing the intergalactic space wrestler known as Omega Bam Man is super, super fun. But that's just selfish. I really love writing Guy Gardner because he's such an a-hole. And I know he's matured, but like, I don't like him that matured. He's still an a-hole to me. He's like Bill Burr with a ring,
Sure.
Right. That's how he's
and that's
quick segue distraction. What do you think of James Gunn's take with Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner?
So that's not, I'll be really honest. I hated it originally. But this is why I have a rational explanation, Mr. Gunn. So please hire me because but it was mostly because Nathan Fillion, I'm such a Firefly prick. Like Firefly is insane to me, and he's captain. That's part of it. Number one. Number two, he voiced Hal Jordan in the animated stuff, so I've always thought of him as Hal Jordan in my head. So all of that being said, there's a moment in the trailer where you see the bowl cut, and he just throws something with his ring for the outside, and I'm like, ooh, okay, but I don't know. I won't know until I hear it.
Right.
And I honestly think that Nathan Fillion has a huge range. What I'm more curious about now, what I'm really curious about is how does that version of Guy Gardner and just Green Lantern fit into, now they released the first picture of Kyle Chandler in
the
Lanterns, and I'm like, it doesn't feel like it's in the same universe, right? Like, so I really want to know what that's like.
Yeah, and then somehow Fillion's supposed to be in the show with them
right.
at least one point. I'm like, okay, I have questions.
Huge questions. Because Lanterns looks incredibly grounded, right?
Yeah, and it's made by the guys from True Detective, and I'm like, okay, I've seen True Detective. I have seen in my mind how this is going to work, and I've seen the Super Bowl spot of Nathan Fillion playing with his hair bob.
Yeah,
and I'm like, how does this work?
Do you think space is going to be silly? That Earth is serious, but like other places, it's kind of a mixed bag. And sometimes we like to have a little fun up here.
I don't know. I mean, that's a good point. That would be a way around it. I'm so curious. This is the thing, though. I was having this conversation with Tim Sheridan today because the Lanterns thing, like if it's so, like they say it's like True Detective and it's so dour. Like if it's so dour, it's going to be like, oh gosh, is this going to be a slog to get through? But at the same time, Damon Lindelof, like going back to Lost, it's like I will follow that guy in the fire because maybe some people don't like the end of Lost, but the journey to get there is awesome.
I personally love the ending. I know Michael was like, but I was like,
it wasn't
about the journey, and that was the payoff.
Definitely not as terrible as people think. But then Leftovers, I think, is crazy too. Leftovers completely bananas. But Watchmen is insane. Watchmen is a level of television that is demoralizing as a writer. And since Lindelof is like, it's like I went to a G3 concert once, which is like Joe Satriani and Steve Vai, and I suck at guitar, but like there was no want to improve because you see these people playing it. And that's what watching Watchmen was like. It was like, so I'm just coloring with crayons because this guy is doing something extra level. So the fact that he's kind of the ringleader of that gives me, and I love Kyle Chandler. Like freaking, I thought he was going to be too old. And that picture to me, I was like, wow, he looks pretty good. Yeah,
and I mean, the touch base on the Watchmen stuff. When Damon Lindelof wrote his kind of like message to the fans, when he put that first letter out, and I'm like, he wrote it like he was Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah, totally.
I read it. I'm like, guys, dude, no one else noticed what he's writing here. He's basically taking that chapter and writing his life in that form. And I'm like, we're good.
I met him once.
We got it.
I met him once at a Warner Brothers party that I snuck into. And by I snuck into, it was like my friend Eric Crosco, who's, genius level writer anyways, but he just, we walked in this thing. And that's like, I briefly met Frank Miller there. And that's where I met Jensen and Jared, I think, because I was like, I'm the guy who's writing Scooby Natural. Anyways, he was getting some food at like one of the stations, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm such a huge, like, I am terrible. My mentor Jim, like he taught me, just like, you don't want to regret, just be the weirdo, and I am the Chris Farley in an elevator like 100% of the time. And I'm talking to this guy who's just a luminary writer, and I'm telling him about how I write Scooby-Doo. You know, like it was just, and in retrospect, it's super embarrassing. But like I was like, oh, I'm a writer too. You know, it's just stupid.
It's a very much surreal thing because like I remember, and this is going to be kind of I want to chase a squirrel for a second to explain this. I remember watching an interview on VH1 with David Lee Roth, how he like geeks out over every single rock star he meets, and they're like, dude, you inspired me, and he's like, I don't care, you're amazing, and he just does that. And I feel like there's got to be that room sometimes when you meet these people, no matter what your status is, no matter what you've accomplished, you find someone that you're like, holy shit, you're the guy that I want to hug because you inspired me, and they're like, you're the one who did this. Like there's this level of humility that you should be allowed to also be that fanboy too. And I think it's always
I'm
really
a fanboy 100% of the time. There's nobody I'm fanboying out that are like, but you, Jeremy, no, they're just like, oh, like Arthur Adams is like, oh, stay away. But
so one thing that I always like to ask when it comes to people who write these characters, anytime that I read a comic or I watch anything that has nothing defined yet, or if I experience like a comic for the first time or read a novel, I tend to attach a voice or an actor to the role of whoever this character is. You have written so many of these cool DC characters. Do you have specific voices that you write them in? Like, do you say, oh, when I'm writing Batman, I think it's Kevin Conroy, and that's the voice that I write the character as? Or is Wally West your voice in your mental when you write these things? Or
it always starts out like that. I'm trying to find a voice, and sometimes I will attach myself to an actor. That was in Green Lantern, the animated series. I remember Jim up on the wall had like, it was Kirk over what's it called, over Hal. And I think it was Bones over Razor, maybe, or whatever. He had him. He's a Star Trek nut, so that's how he kind of like, it was shorthand to figure out. Oh, okay, I get it. So I often will start out that way with and I told him this again in a total fanboy moment, like with Wally. When I first started writing it, I was very much writing Michael Rosenbaum's voice from the cartoon, and if I go to a convention, it's always humbling when I get on the plane and see all the people I've written for in first class as I walk straight back to the back of the plane where, and he was there and he has no idea who I am, but I had my Flash shirt and I'm like, hey, I just want you to know I write this character, but I always think of your voice. And it always starts out that way. And then it morphs and then they get their own unique voice that combines with my writing, the alchemy of it. Like with Hal, it's very much Kevin Costner circa Bull Durham, like that. That is like super charismatic, cocky, but sure of himself, but kind of a schlub. Yeah. And I remember I was watching Bull Durham because I was trying to think. People were speaking my ear like, oh, he's Tom Cruise from Top Gun.
That's how I've always read him as a kid. I was like, it's Maverick.
Like, and I think he is an attitude, but like the way that he speaks, Tom is much more intelligent, it seems like, than what I would think Hal would be. And there's an everyman aspect to Hal that I really, really dig. But that's how it starts. And then as I start writing him and I start exploring different avenues, it definitely takes on its own unique tone. Like Mr. Terrific to me, I started out writing him. I don't necessarily like the traditional characterization of Mr. Terrific as this very emotionless guy. Like there was nothing for me to kind of hang my hat on. And when I started writing him, I was like, well, maybe that's just kind of how he is as Mr. Terrific. But what if he's more like Buckaroo Banzai? And what if he's got some swag? And it's, and then I'm suddenly like, oh, I love this character. Now it's like he's one of my favorite characters. So as a writer, as a fanboy writer, I'm always trying to figure out like, well, what makes me like this character? What's going to make me like this character? Like, I didn't like Ace West or Wallace West. I was like, I don't, they made this character because I know that the Arrowverse was doing a different character for Wally West, and then they brought Wally West back, and there's two Wally's West, and this character's getting left in the dust. And I also like to see if I can use those characters in an interesting way that makes me excited about them. And it helps me as a writer because everybody has their stake and claim in all these different characters. So you're like, well, who can I use? So with that one, like Ace, it's like, I'm going to call him Ace. I'm going to make him, I'm going to talk about them being cousins, which I believe is in continuity. But then I think about my cousin, and my cousin is an absolute hellion. And so Wally being the guy that like makes him ditch school, and Ace being this kind of like straight man that's just like, you're crazy, you know, it suddenly came alive for me. And then it became this character that like, oh, I get who this character is. But yeah, to answer your question, I'm going off of tangents. Like I've been going off on a tangent for like an hour. So pardon me.
No, not at all. Listen, you are all of your work. It is your voice that gets channeled in all of these things. And this thought process, this cloud of information is how that all gets connected.
Right.
You have wife, you have children, you have other commitments. So we'll have to get you again to ask you all the other things we get to ask you.
Let's do a speed round. Hit me with speed round questions. We'll go.
Okay. Well, speed round question we'll definitely do. I want to know, have you ever seen a UFO?
No. But my dad said he was abducted. Yeah. I don't believe him. He's crazy. But you know,
what? Missing time? Does he have implants?
He wrote a whole thing about it. I remember reading it going like, oh, this is freaking me out. You know, and he even said something ominous like, don't worry, it'll happen to you. And I was like, what? And I was totally freaked out. And I went down a conspiracy rabbit hole in high school. But listen, my dad, you know, I love him, but you know.
I have a conspiracy loving father as well that has caused many wakes in my life. Don't worry about it. I feel for you.
But then you also turned into the conspiracy group Among Us. I mean, you're like, I read everything about UFOs. They're real. They're everywhere. Like,
bro, the further we get along into the 2020s, every conspiracy is real. Like, I'm like, holy crap.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I'm also agnostic to whatever it is. Yeah. It is. The phenomenon is real. What it is, where it is, what is intention with us, I don't think anybody knows. And that's the ambiguity. And because people profit off of it, there's a lot of hucksters and shit.
Yeah. Anything else?
Any other speed round questions, Michael?
I don't know. Okay. Favorite Batman villain?
Favorite Batman film? Oh, I would have said Batman 88.
Villain.
Villain. I know it's cliche. It's the Joker. It is.
Okay. He's a great villain.
Killing the Joke was absolutely traumatic. That was traumatic, man. Like that really was. I would say, yeah, the Joker has to be. It, you know.
Favorite writer of the Joker?
Writer of the Joker? I mean, it's Alan Moore because that, like I said, the Killing Joke is just brutal.
Yeah.
You know, Frank Miller's my top writer ever, but yeah.
Okay. Favorite bat gadget or vehicle?
Ooh. Oh, okay. I love this question. Besides the shark repellent spray,
the bat shark repellent.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay. Favorite vehicle. You know, I would have said the Batman 89 Batmobile because that's the freaking tops. You know. My superpowers Batmobile is super rad too. Gosh dang it. The Tumbler is super rad. Is there a bad version of the Batmobile? Like, except in the last Batman movie where you're like, this thing's going to be awesome. And then it gets wrecked. I'm like, this is crap, man. His muscle car. Bat Gadget. Oh my gosh, dude. Oh my gosh. I'm supposed to be speed round. This is not helpful. Batarang with a rope. Keep going. Okay. Yeah.
Spider-Man, organic webbing, or do you like when he has to make the pellets himself?
Oh man, that's tough. I'm a big pellet just because I'm a traditionalist, but I totally get it. You know what I mean? Like I totally get like, well, if this kid can make this, what's he doing as a photographer? You know what I mean? Like if he's that brilliant, and then they've retconned it, right? Like he found the formula from his dad or whatever,
something like that.
Yeah, and it is funny in that last movie where they're like, so you can just like, you know, it's like they talk about how gross it is. Yeah.
So the other day, my side tangent on that. The other day, I bought the extended version of that movie, and that whole conversation's a few minutes longer, and I was like, this is the funniest thing because they're talking about like existential crises and all the other things, and I'm like, why wasn't this in the film? This is the most humanizing moment of the whole thing.
There's a Spider-Man movie. I think I like every Spider-Man movie. Yeah. People bagged on the Andrew Garfield, but I defy you to not be emotionally moved at the one where Gwen Stacy dies, and there's that whole transition, and then that kid standing up to Paul Giamatti's Rhino. And then he comes up and says, I'll take it from here. And I'm just like, I'm fine. I'm fine. You know?
Ugly crying. I'm like, my mascara is everywhere.
Yeah.
Favorite Spider-Man?
Like of the
there's 9,900 Spider-Mans now. Which one?
I'm a big Peter Parker guy. Original people. I like Peter Parker married to Mary Jane. Peter Parker.
Ooh, okay.
That was a big deal when I was a kid. I had the poster of you're invited to this wedding. I'm like, yeah, you know. But the guy from the New Girl, Jake Johnson as Spider-Man in the
Peter Benjamin Parker. Yeah.
First of all, those movies are pretty perfect.
Yeah.
And he's really funny as Spider-Man. I want to see him just as a cameo as Spider-Man in live action because I think he's schlubby enough to pull it off. Anyways.
Yeah. It would be a fun one. If you had a Green Lantern ring, what would be the first construct you make?
Oh, dude, if something to go grab a Red Bull, like a hand or a claw. You know, I'm so lazy. There's no way I would ever have a Green Lantern wing because I have no willpower whatsoever.
Yeah.
But it would be something so dumb because I got to tell you, as a writer for Green Lantern, it is the biggest chore in the world to come up with a new construct.
It would just be hands. That's all it would be. Just
it would be hands. I mean, all you would do is be hands. Yeah.
What is the secondary color ring that you like besides green?
My first ring is actually blue because I'm much more a hopeful person. I'm a super hopeful person. It would be hopeful and then probably willpower.
Okay.
All right. Well, those are all the speed questions.
All right, great. We did it.
We did it. Congratulations. We did it.
We ran through the speed round to the point where we couldn't think of another speed round question.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us tonight.
This went by super quick.
It went really quick. It was very fun. I definitely want to do this again sometime. I will come up with, we could do a 45-minute speed run interview. Yeah. We just ask you thousands of questions.
How do people consume your flash run? Where do I go? Is that I'm sure that I know that there are trades, and but are they in books yet? Can I read these things online? What is the best way to get these things?
DC Infinite has it. It starts in issue 768 all the way to 800, and with a couple annuals in there, and the trades are all out. The first trade is, someday I hope they do an omnibus for me. But the first trade, my stuff starts halfway through.
Okay.
And I would say prep work for reading it is read Heroes in Crisis. And yeah.
Do you post online about your doings in the world? If people want to know about you, where do they go?
You can go to spacekicker.com where you can sign up for my Substack if you want to hear my occasional newsletter. It's not often. I'm not blowing up anybody's email inbox because I get paid to write, so it's really hard to do it when I'm not getting paid. But I do post a lot on X, a lot. And then I post a lot of my unboxing stuff on Instagram where my kids are always the camera person and it gets completely out of control, especially with my youngest daughter. She's like, camera's moving. It's a whole thing.
Sweetheart, look at daddy. Look at daddy's toys.
Yeah.
Look at daddy's toys.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Well, if you can tell us, what are you working on now? What's your next big thing?
I write 4 books a month. I do Aquaman, Green Lantern Corps with Morgan Hampton, and Flash Gordon for Mad Cave. I do a lot of animation still, but a lot of that has yet to be announced.
All right.
Well, we will not make you break NDAs or announcements, but when those things come out, I hope that you will come back and speak about them here. Taylor, bring us home.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us on this episode. If you like what you see, if you want to follow us, like, comment, subscribe. If you're on your TV, if you're watching this at home, scan that QR code, harass me on all of the socials. All of the links are right there. And I am a glutton for punishment. So you send me a DM, I will respond to you. And whether or not it's good or not, I still respond. Sometimes it may just be consequential, or maybe be controversial, but I don't care anymore. Thank you again for joining us, Jeremy. And we will see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye.